Hi everyone, I'm Brittany, the host of the Shed podcast and a health coach here at Shed. Today we're talking about menopause. You might be going through it right now. The weight gain, the sleepless nights, the feeling that your body is changing and nothing that used to work seems to work anymore. It's frustrating, confusing, and often isolating. So what do you do now to maintain a healthy weight and feel like yourself again? Today's guest, Coach GinaMarie, is here to guide us through it. She's a Shed health coach, a national board certified health and wellness coach, and a doctoral candidate pursuing her degree in clinical nutrition. She breaks down exactly what's happening in your body during this transition, from nutrition to movement to mindset, and shares the tools that actually work. She even shares her opinion on using a GLP-1 medication during this stage of life. Because here's the thing, menopause is a metabolic transition, not a dead end. With the right tools, you can retrain your metabolism. Menopause creates a new operating system. And the problem? Most women are still trying to use old strategies on a new physiology. So, without further ado, let's dive on in. All right, Coach Gina, so first question for you is, why does weight loss suddenly become so much harder during menopause, even when habits haven't changed?
Okay, it's multifactorial. There's a lot of different reasons. So often women tell me, I'm doing the same things I've always done, and suddenly nothing's working. And that's exactly what menopause does. It shifts your physiology, even if your habits haven't changed. Estrogen and progesterone decline, and that affects how and where fat is stored on your body. It increases visceral fat around the midsection. You lose muscle more easily, about 10% per year actually. And since muscle is your main metabolic engine, your resting calorie burn drops dramatically. At the same time, insulin sensitivity worsens. You're more prone to blood sugar spikes and fat storage, especially from refined carbohydrates. And of course, let's not forget cortisol. When stress and sleep go off track, you're more likely to retain fat and crave sugar. Appetite regulation also changes. Ghrelin and leptin become less reliable, so you feel hungrier and less satisfied. And for those who are unfamiliar, ghrelin and leptin are your hunger and satiety hormones. So it's not that your metabolism is broken, it's just recalibrated and it needs different inputs now.
There's a lot going on there, right? You listed insulin sensitivity, you listed just some of those biological changes that are happening, and it seems like a lot, and almost that perfect storm to create this very not fun experience when it comes to maintaining weight.
Exactly. It's one of those things where there's so many inputs in your body and there are so many dramatic changes. You know, the loss of hormones really changes how your body metabolizes everything. And you have to really be conscious of that. So, you know, dietary intake has to become much more purposeful, right? And when I say purposeful, I mean more intentional. You have to be striving for something very specific in order to kind of keep your body on track. And that's why even if you do everything exactly the same as you always did it, you're going to get a different outcome.
Yeah. So what I'm kind of seeing is you might be controlling the things that you can control, right? Exercising, eating well, all of those things that you've done for so long. But there are biological shifts that you don't really have control over. So tell me, is this lack of weight loss or weight gain, is that preventable at all? Is there anything that you can do during this time to help you be able to maintain your weight a little bit better?
Absolutely. You know, I guess the larger question is it inevitable? Is everybody just going to get fat when they turn 50? Fat at 50, it should be like its own podcast. But no, the answer is no. Weight gain is common, but it's not a done deal. You can definitely take back control. There's a lot of opportunity there. But the approach has to match the new operating system your body is running. And we're going to talk a lot about that operating system today. One of the first things that you can do is prioritize strength training, specifically progressive overload, because it helps rebuild lost muscle and reverse metabolic slowdown. Another form of exercise that works beautifully is high intensity interval training. Studies show that it improves insulin sensitivity, it boosts mitochondrial function, and it helps you burn way more calories when you're just sitting around doing nothing. So you get a lot more bang for your exercise buck, if you will. Protein intake. This is something that, you know, where it used to be a little more ambiguous, it's non-negotiable now. So I usually suggest aiming for about 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight, especially if you're training. Walking is also powerful. It lowers post-meal glucose, it reduces stress, it helps with recovery, and sleep and stress aren't just supportive, they're central. So cortisol is a fat storage hormone and it thrives in chaos. So this stage isn't really about doing more, it's about doing smarter, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you listed some awesome things there: progressive overload, high intensity interval training, protein walking, sleep hygiene, all of those things. Is it necessary to do all of those things, or are those just some options of things that you can maybe implement that will be helpful during this time?
I'd say that they're options that are available. With any exercise program, obviously we want to make sure that we're healthy and we're able to do exercise at any stage of life, right? We want to make sure that that's okay to do. But generally speaking, conventional wisdom, and the studies suggest that 2 times a week of doing strength training and maybe 3 times a week of doing cardio is probably likely to help you here. But the reason why high intensity interval training is being recommended is because you get a lot more metabolic bang for your buck. It does stabilize insulin regulation. It forces your muscles to take up more glucose so that glucose doesn't sit in your bloodstream. So it is one of those things that's a little more powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's helpful to have like those, how many times a week should I be doing this? What should this look like? So I would love to hear from you. Like, what does your weekly routine look like in terms of exercise? What are you doing?
What am I doing? I work out 5 to 6 times a week. I do cardio daily. I do strength training daily. So I'm on a body part split. So, on Monday, let's say for Mondays, I'll do back and biceps. Right. And then on Tuesdays, I'll do chest and triceps. And on Wednesday, I'll do lower body, legs, glutes and that sort of thing. And then I'll just repeat the cycle throughout the rest of the week. But I do cardio on a daily basis. And I found for me personally, doing cardio on a daily basis allows me to eat in a way that is not so tightly restrictive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that leads to my next question, where our go-to is, okay, well, if I'm not burning as many calories because of biological shifts, then I just eat less, right? I have to restrict calories in order to stay in that calorie deficit. Is that something you recommend, is cutting calories, eating less? And if so, why? If not, why?
Okay. Calories are tough. Because when I think about calories, all I think about is energy, right? Calories are just basically little heat molecules. And when we talk about the just eat less myth, I'd like to reframe it a little bit because it does require a little bit of truth telling. The idea that you don't need to eat less in menopause is really not the full story. You probably do need fewer calories because you're burning fewer. But the real issue isn't just how much you eat, it's what those calories are made of. So, before menopause, you could get away with a lot more. Snacks, sugar, less protein, and you could still stay relatively lean. But now every calorie has to pull its own weight. Your body can't afford empty carbs or ultra-processed foods anymore. Those calories don't support your hormones, your muscles, or your metabolic repair. Instead, you need nutrient-dense meals high in protein, healthy fats, fiber, and micronutrients. So yes, you may need to eat a little bit less, but only if what you're eating is doing more for you. So nutrient density is now the name of the game rather than calorie restriction.
Yeah, nutrient density. I was having a conversation with my brother a couple days ago, actually, and he was asking me, what does nutrient density mean? Like, does that just mean I'm hitting my protein goals? Does that mean I'm hitting my, fat goals, my carbohydrate goals? And so I started to explain it a little bit to him. And so I would love for you, again, just like we did with exercise, to give an inside peek into, first of all, what nutrient density is, and also like maybe a little bit of what your diet looks like eating that really nutrient dense diet.
Sure. Nutrient density, most people when they think of nutrient density, they go right for macros. They're like, oh, my macros need to be on point. I need to get X grams of protein and I need to get X grams of carbohydrates. I need to get X grams of fat. And actually, when we talk about nutrient density from a biochemical standpoint, what we're really talking about is running metabolic pathways. Your body has multiple metabolic pathways that it has to run to produce the energy currency of the cell, which is ATP, right? And nutrient density specifically refers to the cofactors required to run those metabolic pathways. So we're talking about things like niacin, like, riboflavin, like pantothenic acid, like, iron, magnesium, calcium. There are a variety of different cofactors that have to be present in the diet in order for your body to produce ATP. And ATP is the energy currency that allows you to do work. Without ATP, you cannot move. So nutrient density is really, really important because you could eat a ton of extra calories and still be sluggish, fatigued, exhausted, and have no energy during the day. to do the things you want to do.
Okay. So when you think about those like almost micronutrients as cofactors for your metabolism, and that's really what we're trying to do here, especially in menopause as the metabolism slows down, is boost it in a way, right? To be
Yes.
able to lose weight or be able to maintain that weight that you maybe have for lots of time. And so what does that diet look like? Like, is it eggs in the morning? What does that kind of look like on a day-to-day basis?
For me, it's all about eating the rainbow. As trite as that sounds, and as cliche as that sounds, it's really about eating the rainbow. Because when you eat the rainbow, you feed your mitochondria, and your mitochondria are where all of your ATP is produced. So for me, the more colorful my plate, the more of those micronutrients I know I'm getting into my body to be able to run the pathways that I run. So generally speaking, if I produce a plate, and I'm making something for dinner, 50% of my plate has a lot of color. It's a lot of vegetables. It's a lot of mixed vegetables, carrots and kale and Brussels sprouts and broccoli and all of those types of things, maybe with a little bit of fruit, some berries, strawberries, blackberries, blueberries. And then I do about 25% of the plate protein and about 25% of the plate a complex carbohydrate with a lot of fiber in it. So generally speaking, most of your nutrient density comes from the vegetables on your plate. And the beauty of that is that if you still remain hungry after you're done eating your plate of food, you can continue to eat vegetables, continue to get that nutrient density without adding to your energy load.
Yes, I love vegetables for that reason. They make you feel almost fuller faster while giving you so many micronutrients,
Exactly.
fiber, all of those awesome things.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. So we kind of know what exercise should look like. We know what eating and a nutrient dense diet should look like to really help with some of these biological shifts that are happening. Let's talk about something that everyone is talking about these days, which are GLP-1 medications. I have family members who are going through menopause right now, and they know that I work for a GLP-1 company. And so I've been having conversations, and they've brought to me, I'm kind of thinking about this. I can't get my weight under control. I feel not like myself. And so they're considering these GLP-1 medications. My question for you is, what are your thoughts on GLP-1 medications for women in this phase of life who have difficulty maintaining their weight that they previously held?
I feel like the GLP-1 is a savior for women at this stage of life. Honestly, I really do. They can be incredibly helpful for women in this stage, especially if insulin resistance or cravings or food noise are getting in the way, which is a large part of what we see every day in the coaching room, right? But GLP-1s do a beautiful job improving insulin sensitivity. It slows gastric emptying. It reduces appetite. It also shuts down that food noise. For many women, it helps lower the volume on the constant mental battle with food that gives them the space to refocus on movement or sleep or strength. One of the things that I hear most often is that people didn't realize they had their own voice. They thought that the food noise voice was their voice. And once a GLP-1 kind of rolls that back and turns the volume down a little bit on that, they're able to listen to the own wisdom in their head to make decisions, which allows them to make much better decisions about how they move forward. So the challenge that we have with GLP-1s is that they don't build muscle. So while you're on a GLP-1, you still have to be actively doing that, right? Because we want to improve metabolism. They don't improve fitness or strength, and they certainly don't add to emotional resilience. They're a tool, not a replacement for the work. So what I like to tell people is, GLP-1s are a great bridge. What's on the other side of that bridge still has to be built, so you still have to put in the work.
Yes, and that's what I'm seeing where GLP-1s fit into this whole equation is we harped, in the first section of this podcast about nutritional changes that need to happen and the importance of nutrition density. We talked about exercise. And so if you don't have these foundational habits, right, maybe life has gotten in the way. You're raising kids, you're going back to school, you're working a full-time job, and maybe you have for a little bit eaten healthy in a way or been on a certain diet at some point, or maybe did a challenge at the gym that you decided to join on January 1st one year, but they haven't become these foundational habits for you. It can be hard to just snap your fingers and say, okay, Coach Gina said I need to implement these things. Let me do this. That is where GLP-1 medications come in. They serve as that tool to almost raise that ceiling a little bit, to be able to have the ability to create some of these habits without that food noise that sometimes people don't even realize is there, if I'm getting that right.
Yeah, most people don't know that it's a separate entity, right? They think it is them. And they realize once they get on a GLP-1 that it's not them at all, that they have that their voice is completely different from this other voice. And that once it's quiet, they're really able to think straight. The GLP-1 is great for holding space, to have your own thought process, become the forefront rather than the thing behind you. Right. So I think that people really like getting the control back. And once they feel like they have that control back, then they feel empowered to make changes, and they feel that they can be more successful with that implementation.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned with GLP-1s that I think is important to note is this idea of insulin sensitivity. And that happens whenever you reach menopause, is that insulin sensitivity becomes a factor. Tell me a little bit about that and like the biology behind that.
That's actually the easiest thing to explain. Insulin resistance is really easy to explain. Your muscles have, certain signaling, certain cellular signaling, let's call them chemical messengers, that move to the edge of the muscle to absorb glucose from the bloodstream. And because your muscle mass drops so dramatically when you cross into menopause, those signals are not going to the edge anymore, and they're not as efficient at pulling glucose from the bloodstream anymore. So as a result of that, you end up with more circulating glucose in your system. So as a result of that, your body has to keep putting out more insulin. It just has to keep doing that over and over and over again to try to combat that glucose, because insulin is what allows the muscle to open up and take in that glucose. Now, what ultimately ends up happening, it's kind of like a child who is running to your door and playing ding dong ditch, right? The kid keeps banging on the door, and you're like, Mikey, stop banging on the door. I know it's you. Eventually you don't come to the door anymore because you know it's Mikey, right? And that's kind of the way insulin resistant works. Eventually the muscle just stops responding to insulin because it's become adapted to that knocking on the door. It just no longer hears it anymore, and the cells will not open up and accept glucose. So this is what it means to become insulin resistant.
Okay. And GLP-1s help with that insulin
sensitivity. That's correct.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what the future kind of looks like. If you are going through menopause, if you are starting to go through menopause, you've given some really awesome tips that women can start implementing into their life to help with this weight gain that might be starting to happen. My question that I know so many women have is, will it be like this forever? And I know you touched on it a little bit, but I would love for you to dive into what kind of can they expect over the next 10, 20, 30 years of their life?
Okay, well, the good news is that it's never too late to make changes, right? Your body is still adaptable in your 50s, your 60s, and certainly beyond that. We see women, in their 60s and 70s who go on to build muscle, who go on to do great things, who have energy well into their 80s, who reduce their fall risks, all of that. Muscle can be rebuilt. Metabolism can become more efficient. Insulin resistant can certainly improve. Fat can be lost sustainably with the right approach. The key is to stop chasing the body you had at 35, right? And to start building the body that's going to carry you forward with strength and stability. So what we're really looking for here is strength and optimal health and wellness rather than thinness, right? Thinness should not be the goal. Optimal health and wellness should be the goal.
I love that. I feel like I've, of course I haven't hit menopause, but I've gone through that mental shift where for so long it was about being the thinnest person in the room, or just thinness, and you would eat for that, right? And so whenever there's this mental shift, I used to feel like, okay, I just have to accept being not in the body that I want to be in, but it's not that at all. And I think that's what you're kind of alluding to, is that there's this shift to accepting the body that you have and the changes that you're going through, while also knowing that there are things that you can do about it, right? There is still a sense of control that you can have. Eating nutrient-dense meals, trying to implement an exercise routine that is realistic for you, viewing going to the gym and lifting those weights as, wow, I get to be on the floor with my grandkids in a few years, or I get to still be out walking. I have a neighbor across the street who goes on his walks every morning. He's 80 years old, and it's so awesome to see, people out there and still enjoying life, still being able to travel, move around, those sorts of things. And when that mental shift from thinness to optimal health, functionality, health, right? I don't want to be at the doctor's office every other week for the rest of my life. That is motivation and that deeper why in itself. So yeah, I love that you brought that mental piece of it into this conversation as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with you. This is what happens when you get older. I don't know if you've ever been around a bunch of old people, but typically all they talk about is what's wrong with them, what's broken, right? What isn't working? Oh, my back hurts, my legs hurt, I can't get up, everything aches, everything creaks, everything makes noises. I feel like as you get older, you want to compress the poor health years into the smallest possible window, and you want to extend, as long as possible, your functionality and your strength and your power. Right? That's really what we're aiming for here, is getting people to be empowered throughout every life stage.
Yes. And something that I want to highlight again that you said is it's never too late. Even if you are in your 50s, even if you are in your 60s, even if you are in your 70s listening to this, it is not too late to start. There is still time to implement some of these things. You mentioned a little bit earlier, and I'm excited to dive into this, that menopause creates a new operating system. And I love that key phrase right there, an operating system. Can you explain a little bit more what that means and how women can work with it instead of fighting against it?
Absolutely. I use the phrase because menopause literally rewires how your metabolism works. You have to think of your premenopausal body like an operating system that runs on certain default settings, right? Like steady estrogen levels, more predictable insulin sensitivity, and higher muscle mass by default, right? But after menopause, these settings change. You're running a new OS, one where estrogen no longer acts as a metabolic buffer. Your body doesn't build or maintain muscle as easily, and fat is stored more efficiently, especially around the middle. It's not malfunctioning, it's just using a different code, which is why I use the operating system analogy. The problem is most women keep trying to run premenopause apps like chronic cardio, restrictive dieting, or under fueling on the new system. And those strategies just don't work. And ultimately they crash the system and they make things worse.
And I feel like so many people who are going through menopause right now grew up in that culture of the crash diets and the eat less, exercise more. And so I'm so happy that you talked about different strategies, more sustainable strategies that are not only going to lead to being able to maintain a healthy weight, but also bring a little bit more happiness to your life, right? You still get to enjoy foods and flavorful and colorful foods that you can make on your plate while also being able to maintain that health and a healthy weight for yourself. My last question for you, you have mentioned a couple times belly fat. And I know I have clients in the coaching room that ask me, Coach Brittany, how do I target belly fat? So I want to ask you, and I want to hear your answer to this. Is it possible to target that stubborn belly fat? Yes or no, and then kind of go into some strategies on, how to maybe lose some of that belly fat.
Well, the short answer is no. You cannot target fat in one area of your body. There used to be an old myth back in the 60s and 70s, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, that you can target one part of your body to the exclusion of all the rest. And unfortunately, your body doesn't work that way. So if you are burning fat, you are burning fat everywhere. You are burning fat from your face, you're burning fat from your arms, you're burning fat from your legs, you're burning fat from your booty, you're burning fat from your belly, you're burning fat from your back. It all drops off at the genetically programmed rate that you have as an individual. So there is really no way to target that. I mean, obviously you can tone, right? We can get things more lean, we can get things more toned. And as you strip away body fat, those toned areas will become more visible, which is fantastic, but there's no way to strategically target one area of fat versus another area.
Yeah.
I wish there was.
I know. I always say that. I'm like, I wish I had some magic potion to be able to target that certain specific area. But yeah, I think I love your answer about this, that you can't target. Our bodies are so much more complex than just being able to say, hey, let me do some crunches and lose fat. Of course, you can tone once that fat layer is kind of removed, and then you're able to see that tone, lean type of look. But really, I think just focusing on the things that you mentioned today, right? Diet, exercise, stress management, and sleep. One final thing, and I would love to do a whole podcast episode with you on this specific topic, but sleep. I know sleep is really, really tough for women going through menopause. Without going too deep into it, is there any little tips or things that have worked well for you that you could give to our audience today?
Sleep is probably the single most dysfunctional part of menopause for most women, not for all women, but for most women. For me, it was the bane of my existence, and it still is. I was one of those people who started going through menopause or perimenopause when I was like 43 years old, and I'm 59 now, so I'm long past it. But sleep was the first thing that left the building. And when I say it left the building, I mean it. It left the building. At the peak of, perimenopause, I was getting maybe 3 or 4 hours a night. And I was waking up in the middle of the night with heart palpitations and, jumping up like it was a fire drill and all of those kinds of things. And no matter what I did, nothing seemed to work. And the reason why is because the shifts in your hormones are so dramatic that it is very jarring and it creates additional stress hormone. And those additional stress hormones keep you up, and it completely dysregulates your circadian rhythm. So you're exhausted during the day, you're tired and wired, you lay down to sleep at night, you're completely ready to go to sleep, and then either you get to sleep and you're up all night, wandering because you can't stay there, or you can't get to sleep at all. So yeah, sleep was the bane of my existence. And I do have a very tight routine now. I mean, it is really tight, really healthy. It's based on turning off the phone and keeping the room at 68 degrees and pitch black and dead silent and all of those things. But I still wake up 3 or 4 times a night. I wish I could give somebody better insight into what to do, but I'm still waking up, even perfecting it to the best of my ability. Post menopause, I'm still unable to sleep straight through an 8-hour shift. I just can't do it.
Yeah. We can only control what we can control. And it sounds like you have a great sleep hygiene routine that might be a little bit helpful, and you're willing to put in that, extra effort in order for you to get, even if it's a 1, 2, 3% type of change there.
Exactly.
But I think also on the topic of controlling what you can, nutrition, exercise, stress management, those are 3 things right there that you mentioned today, and ways that, you can still kind of be pushing towards those health goals during this time in your life.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, Gina, anything else that you would like to mention today to our audience about menopause and weight loss?
Yeah, if there's one thing I want women to understand, it's this. It's that you don't need to fight your body. You need to understand it. And once you do that, you can work with it, not against it. And that's where the real lasting change happens. You just have to, you have to accept.
Yeah. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Coach Gina, for all of your insight, all of your education today. We really appreciate it. Thank you, audience, for listening into this week's episode of the Shed Podcast. We will see you here next week.